Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with one of Wall Street's top deal makers and Skadden's youngest partner ever. We discussed her career on Wall Street, her book, The Savvy Lawyer's Playbook, how Christmas 2007 changed her life forever, and so much more. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on iTunes. We interview corporate defense, law firm leaders, partners, general counsel, and legal consultants. You're listening to episode 56 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of both men and women serving as leaders and executives in the legal industry. Enjoy a front row seat as Chris Batts speaks with general counsel, legal consultants, and law firm leaders and law partners at the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Nancy Lieberman, recently retired M&A partner at Skadden Arps. Nancy has a 39-year career at Skadden and known as one of Wall Street's top deal makers. At age 30, Nancy became Skadden's youngest partner ever. Shortly after, she was named one of the 50 most influential women lawyers in America. In 2013, she was named Dealmaker of the Year by the American Lawyer. She's an adjunct lecturer at Columbia Law School teaching on mergers and acquisitions. She is also a co-founder of New Yorkers to Cure Paralysis and very passionate about finding a cure and fundraising for the cause. She's the author of The Savvy Lawyer's Playbook. She received her law degree from the University of Chicago and her LLM from NYU Law. Welcome, Nancy, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris.
Nancy, your story is just extraordinary and so fun to dive into. So I'd love for you to share. So if I understand correctly, you went to undergrad at an early age and you also graduated from law school at an early age.
Yes.
Tell me about that drive. Why did you do that, or what was behind all that?
The drive was that I think I was bored being a kid and I wanted to be a grown-up. And I knew what I wanted to do, which is to go to law school. So I had the opportunity to go to the University of Chicago, my first choice, after my junior year in college. And because I had previously skipped a couple of grades, I was able to get my JD degree at the age of 22.
That's extraordinary. You landed with Skadden your choice of employer?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My first choice, after interviewing with many law firms during my second year of law school, which is pretty typical when you get summer associate jobs.
And so, Nancy, today we get to announce, and you've probably told many others, that you are publishing The Savvy Lawyer's Playbook, which is this amazing compilation of wisdom you've gained and wish you had when you started law. So on this episode, we're going to walk through anecdotes of that, basically for attorneys progressively in their career. So I'd love to just jump in because you landed at one of the most extraordinary law firms, such an incredible global brand name, and you were an associate there and even one of the youngest attorneys to ever begin there and become partner. Share a little bit about that and maybe some wisdom for early lawyers.
Well, I guess what I would say is it's most important for you to understand what you know and what you don't know after law school. You have a lot of book knowledge, but you don't have much practical experience. And you're only going to get that by working hard, sometimes staying up all night and just figuring a lot out on your own, which is basically how I did it. So there's no easy way. And you always have to remember you don't really know so much when you get out of law school. A lot of it is just experience. So that's kind of my view on it.
And Nancy, share with my listeners, Skadden was your goal, and I can tell you're just very driven and goal-oriented. What was it like working for Skadden back in the 80s?
Oh, it was like electricity was pulsing down the hallways. These were the days before the internet. So we had developed a niche practice in mergers and acquisitions, and our IT, our intellectual property really, was private. It was our own. And so we were one of the few go-to firms doing M&A and making the law as we went along. I mean, so much of the law is based on, Delaware court decisions. And we were at the forefront of litigating those cases, which created the structure of modern M&A. So it was exciting. You were there. You were doing the deals that were on the front page squibs in the Wall Street Journal. One time I had 3 deals mentioned in a row on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and it was pretty exciting.
Was it your intent to be an M&A lawyer, or were you kind of debating between that and litigation?
After 1 or 2 weeks in law school, I decided that I absolutely didn't want to be a litigator because it was mean, it was nasty, you were suing people or threatening that. Whereas M&A or corporate law just seemed like you were creating something, and it was ultimately a positive experience if you put a deal together and the company did well. So to me, it was a positive way of practicing law, and I had no interest in being a litigator.
And did you find M&A kind of come natural for you, or were there sponsors that really kind of took you under their wing?
It came naturally to me. And I think, as I have told lots of people, the most important thing in life, as vis-a-vis whatever job you do, is it should come easy to you. And if it comes easy, then you're going to be able to jump into it and put one building block on top of the other. If something is a chore and you're miserable, don't do it, because your work product will suffer because you don't like what you're doing. And I just was so lucky, not realizing it when I started law school at the age of 19, that corporate law and M&A was what I was interested in. I kind of fell into it. It just sang to me. And here I am, 39 years, 40 years later.
It's extraordinary. Such a wonderful story. Tell me about that journey as an associate, and you became partner early. You're the youngest partner ever in Skadden's history.
Yes. Well, first of all, again, I had skipped a few years of school by the time I got out of law school. But after law school, because I was so young, I decided to be a federal judge, a Court of Appeals judge in the Fifth Circuit, law clerk. And then I got another advanced degree in tax law. And I went to my firm and they said, we're going to give you credit for those first 2 years. While I was really a first-year associate, I was treated as a third-year associate, which scared the daylights out of me, because in those days, there was an expression, that after 7 or 8 years, if you weren't made a partner, up and out, you had to leave. And I knew I was going to love working at Skadden, so I was only afraid, oh my God, how am I going to learn and get all the experience I need in 5.5 years when everyone else gets 7.5 years? And somehow I managed to do it. So it was luck. And I think it's because, as I said earlier, I loved immediately doing what I did.
Nancy, we're in interesting times in corporate America, both government, both political, and just lots of arenas. And did it feel challenging for you to be such an up-and-coming female lawyer in a male-dominant environment? And how did the firm, just share with my listeners that experience for you.
Well, first of all, I never thought of myself at a disadvantage, because I was fortunate to grow up in a family where my father just said, go for it. Go to the best school you can go to, and we're behind you. So I never thought of myself as, oh, gee, poor me, I'm a woman and I'm trying to make it in a man's world. I just figured, okay, I want this, I'm going to go after it. So I never had any of that mental baggage that a lot of people would share. Now, the other good thing is that I went to a firm that really our modern founding partner, Joe Flom, had created, and he was a great egalitarian, fair-minded person. And so nobody cared in those days whether you were a man or woman, whatever. All they wanted was for you to be a really great lawyer. And instead of having roadblocks thrown in my way, they figured out that I liked what I was doing and I was producing good work, and they encouraged me. It was a very unique and different environment, and I was so fortunate.
Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, legal recruiter and owner of the Lion Group. My team and I place legal and compliance talent around the United States and are known for our level of communication, speed, and strong track record. If you're an employer hiring your first attorney or first general counsel or adding talent to your corporate legal department or compliance team, we should talk. Also, if you're a corporate defense law partner or group wondering about your options for a lateral move, we should also talk. Every aspect of our process is confidential, fast, and thorough. Contact us by going to our website, findthelions.com, or you can text the word headhunter to the number 44222, and then complete the web form and we'll follow up with you shortly. Now back to the show. Nancy, so you became partner rather quickly.
Yes.
And in your book, you talk about this notion of field general advice.
Yes.
Would you share some of that for my listeners as they are senior associates or getting to that level of leadership where they're managing?
Right. That's a really important thing. The way that you kind of become a partner at a law firm is that you take on responsibility and you run with it. And a lot of people are very good at, drafting a contract or even negotiating certain business points. But what they don't do is they can't manage all the different aspects of a litigation, or in my case, a merger deal. And in my case, it would be getting the tax lawyers, figuring out you need an environmental lawyer specialist. Maybe there are antitrust issues. And you've got to put together what I would call a symphony orchestra of specialists to handle, a big M&A transaction. And when you're a senior associate, you have to really demonstrate to the partners in these other departments that you can function like, the person in charge, and you have to inspire confidence. And so that's what I mean by field general. Not only do you have to, draft a contract or negotiate, major issues, you have to keep all the balls bouncing in the air so that the orchestra, puts out the beautiful music and gets the merger deal signed up very quickly, particularly if it's a public company deal, because, there's a big concern about the stock price running up, there being leaks, too much volume trading creates all sorts of issues and disclosure obligations that you want to avoid. It could also cause you harm with your employees if they know that perhaps the company is, being acquired or is acquiring something. So you want to keep everything moving very quickly without dropping any of the balls. If you could demonstrate that on top of the nuts and bolts of lawyering, it really goes a long way in helping your career.
Nancy, you have been drawn into several big battles in your lifetime as an M&A lawyer, and you've dealt with some very strong name brand hostile takeover artists, if you may.
Well, that was in the 80s. Now they're called activists.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as it was 30, 40 years ago. It's just the nomenclature has changed.
Nothing's changed.
Well, they've changed, but it's just, something is wearing a different color jacket. Let's put it that way. But it's basically similar.
And so you got to see that whole world be created, Green Money and the Poison Pill and all of the books that are written about some of the most dramatics.
Yes.
Any war stories you care to share or experiences while you're in the middle of that?
Well, I remember one of the things that I still will never forget. I was working on the Skadden team as a senior associate when Carl Icahn was interested in acquiring United States Steel. In those days, its name was USX, but it's essentially United States Steel. And we were negotiating with him for months on end. And then all of a sudden, a phone call came into a conference room at our firm. And his bankers at that time were from the now defunct firm Drexel Burnham. And apparently they had gotten word that there was Ivan Boesky was arrested and there was, an insider trading issue. And they all just got up and left. And that was, at least for a while, the end of that takeover attempt or transaction. So, when you have experiences like that, it just leaves such a strong impression on you. It's amazing how you never know where something's going to come up and create a big problem. And that was certainly memorable.
So Nancy, you've definitely been in the heat of the battle of lots of intense corporate negotiations, and with investment bankers and investors. What are some of those anecdotal takeaways for negotiations that you can share with my listeners that I know you have in your book?
I would say a couple of things. Number one, negotiating a deal it's not a sin to give in and come up with a compromise. I think a lot of feel that, you've got to win everything. And so, and if you give anything, you're going to be viewed as weak. And it's almost, my analogy would be what's going on now in Congress, where there are extremes on either side and people don't quite get to the middle. And being reasonable is not a sin. It's a virtue. The other thing I would say to folks is you need to know what your non-negotiable points are and what the other party's non-negotiable issues are. You just make up a list, really, and people don't really focus on that. They treat every issue equally, and that's ridiculous. You got to find out what must that other party really, really have. And the beauty of doing that is when you apply that, you realize that there are things you really don't care about that they must have. And you're willing to give them what they want to get something that you really want for your client. And I think if people took a step back and realized that, they'd be a lot better off. I guess the other thing I would say is the dumbest thing I've ever seen people do is make an empty threat. If you're in a negotiation or even a litigation, it's really all the same. And you say to the other party, we're out of here. We're not going to do this deal. And you pick up and you leave. And then a few days later, you've overplayed your hand and you have to go back and say, well, on second thought, you'll have no credibility. You really have to be judicious, very careful to make a threat. And before you do that, you've got to clear it with your client, because I've also seen people make those ridiculous threats when I know that their client doesn't agree with that point. And I can't imagine why they do that, but they do. And it just destroys their credibility. So I think that that's pretty important. Don't make an empty threat.
So Nancy, I know that in corporate hostile negotiations that sometimes they can go into long, wee hours of the night and be rather exhausting. And, you got everybody in a room and they're up till 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning. Have you had environments like that, or what has it been like for you to negotiate in an intense environment?
First of all, just when you're up at 3 in the morning and you had very little sleep the night before, which is invariably what happens, it's a tough situation to live through, because part of your head is saying, I want to go to sleep. But you had asked me a little earlier about, particularly in an unfriendly situation with an activist, the gentleman that I had been on deals with from the time I was an associate in the 80s until relatively recently had been Carl Icahn, who's been around for a very long time. He'll definitely keep you up late at night because he loves to negotiate. And at the end of the day, I think you'll repeat what you think the deal is. You may end up signing off, and then the next day he'll raise the issue again, and he'll either forget, which I don't think he forgets anything. He's a very brilliant man, but he'll want to renegotiate it for whatever reason. And it's very hard until you finally have signed the documents, to know whether or not there's a deal to be made. It's fun, but it's hard. And I have to say that there were times when I would make a point that I thought was extremely valid, And he is so smart that, he always has a great comeback. But one or two times I made a point that on a conference call with a lot of people, and he slammed the phone down, and that was the end of the call. So, when you've been working you've been working really hard, and it's 3 a.m. or whatever time it is at night, and after doing all that work, the phone slams down on you. That's not the way you want it to go. But eventually, that particular deal that I'm thinking of, it all worked out. And everybody, including Mr. Icahn, walked away very happy.
Such a great story, Nancy. You have one that's pretty dear to Kansas City, and I'd love for you to share the saga that you were very intimate involved in, and most of the people in Kansas City would know this story. So please share.
I got involved representing wonderful company, Kansas City Power and Light, that has gone through multiple name changes since around 1990 when I first worked on a matter. They wanted to acquire in an unfriendly deal Kansas Gas and Electric based in Topeka. And of course, that company also changed its name multiple times, became Westar Energy and Western Resources, then Westar Energy. And, it's hard to keep all these names straight. That deal ended up not happening, but it could have happened. But I think the pricing just didn't work out. So that deal never happened. And then I got a phone call several years later from one of the wonderful executives at that company. And I guess it was the first one was 1990 to 1991. Then around 1995, 96, I got a call, and Kansas City Power and Light was going to merge with another local company that had been called MOPUB, or Missouri Public Gas Company, or Electric and Gas. And its name had at that point changed to Utilicorp United. And then it changed again after that. But that deal was going to happen. It was going to be, a stock for stock merger. And then what was Kansas Gas and Electric and had become Westar Energy blew it up by making an allegedly higher offer. And so again, that went on for multiple years. We did multiple merger agreements. Ultimately, that deal didn't happen because their stock price dropped precipitously. And that was the end of that. And then eventually what happened was Utilicorp. We had the Great Plains Energy Company, that was its name then, ended up acquiring, electric assets in Missouri and Kansas from a, public company, and ended up selling off the gas assets to a company based in South Dakota called Black Hills Corporation, which was extremely complex M&A deal. And ultimately, that happened in the early 2000s, like 2006-ish. That's where it lie when 3 major deals, I think there was something like 8 or 9 different agreements signed throughout a over 20-year period. And I love going to Kansas City. I love the Plaza. I love Plaza 3 Steakhouse. There's nothing like a great Kansas City steak, and I miss it very much.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's that now company is called Evergy. Evergy is the final maybe rendition of the utility company in our backyard that has gone through lots of iterations that you've been intimately involved in.
Multiple names, all of them.
Nancy, I want to talk about Christmas 2007.
Okay.
And what happened for you. That was a life-changing event. Would you share what happened?
Sure, no problem. I loved skiing. I had worked very hard that year, including doing the Great Plains Energy deal, and probably worked as hard as I'd ever worked as an associate, let alone a senior partner. So my family, we love skiing, and we're good skiers, so we went out west to take a ski holiday. And the very first day, on the very first run down Telluride, I caught an edge, which meant I lost my balance. And Telluride is a very steep mountain, and I couldn't stop my speed, even though I was on a relatively flat area. And I skied over the side of the mountain, because unlike other resorts where they have netting that kind of keeps you within bounds, they didn't have that there. And just when I was near a clearing of trees, I hit a tree with my neck. It snapped. I heard it, and I became paralyzed. And I'm now paralyzed from kind of, my middle section down. So I do have some use of my arms, which I got back from a lot of rehabilitation, but my fingers really don't move around very much. And it's difficult. It really changes your life dramatically. You need a lot of help. You can't really be left alone because if, God forbid, there's a fire or something bad, you can't, you'll just sit there. You can't move. So it's hard. It's not easy, but there's still a lot of great things I can do. And I've traveled to almost every continent in the world since then: Africa, Asia, Europe, South America, North America. I've been all over the place. Nothing, stops me. So I could still do a lot of things. And what I can't physically do, let's just say I've become the executive chef for making apple pies and soup and all sorts of great cooking things. I love gardening. So I've become the executive gardener, telling people where to plant the seeds and what's a weed and what's a flower and, and all of that. So I've kept as much of my hobbies as possible. And I went back to practicing law. I actually had my best days after my accident. I was busier than I ever was. So, it didn't stop me.
Nancy, this resiliency and just an awesome story of success. What advice would you give lawyers who are listening, or professionals really of all types, who've been through hard things or could be going through hard things?
Well, I'll tell you, my father, Eli, had a wonderful expression: every knock is a boost. And that just says it all. When you suffer a hardship, and, the paralysis thing, probably one of the worst problems that a human being could have and still have their intellectual capabilities. But that wasn't the only knock I've had in life. When I applied to college, I was turned down by almost every college I applied to, including the one I ultimately went to, because they reconsidered my application. So all it did was spur me to do really well. And I graduated in a class of over 1,200 or 1,300 students at the University of Rochester. And I came out first in my class, and I did it in 3 years instead of the 4 years. I took my first year of law school at Chicago, was counted as my last year of college. So to me, it's just a challenge, and really keeps your mind sharp because you're always figuring workarounds to solve a problem, which is basically what a lawyer has to do: solve problems, think on your feet.
Nancy, you enjoy mentoring lawyers, correct?
Particularly women. Yep. Not all women like doing that, by the way. Sometimes the ladies could be your worst enemies, but I've seen some of that. But I really enjoy mentoring people.
That's excellent. And do they seek you out, or is that something that you put yourself in front of them, or how does that work?
Well, obviously, some are women who have worked with me. You know what I gravitate to in the work environment? I gravitate toward people, men or women, who can produce and are, you see the flash of intelligence even when they're young lawyers, and they're proactive. And anyone who is proactive, sharp, and can keep up, particularly if it's a woman, and then I gravitate to the people I'm most comfortable with. And I never really thought, oh, gee, that's a woman. Now I have to have a guy work with me, a younger associate. But interestingly, when you look at the teams I would assemble, I'd say well more than half happen to be women lawyers at my firm. So I think the women, this is going to sound very stereotypical, but they're very detail-oriented. And in the law, everything, the devil is in the details.
You had this accident in 2007, incredibly resilient,
Right.
hasn't held you back from practicing law or travel. And you've been the co-founder of a organization supporting the research of spinal injuries. Is that correct?
Spinal cord injuries. Sure. Yes.
Share a little bit about that. And I know that something happened with the state, and just love to hear your heart for it.
Okay. Well, very quickly, our state, New York State, had a paralyzed state trooper who was injured in the line of duty, and one of the biggest causes of these injuries are drunk drivers driving, a car off the road, or down an embankment, or speeding drivers. So his idea was, if you cause the harm, you have to be part of the solution, and people get hit with a significant speeding ticket, surcharge, or DUI, or any moving violation, and that money goes into a segregated account, and the first $8.5 million a year is supposed to go towards spinal cord injury, and it worked beautifully. But in the Great Recession of 2008, when New York State was, like every state, in deep trouble, they just decided to cut the program, which sort of defeated the purpose of the law, which was to keep it segregated. It was not part of the tax concept of New York State. And I worked very hard. I co-founded that entity with a wonderful person similarly paralyzed like me. And we succeeded in marshaling some of the top researchers really in the United States and the world came to New York because this significant pot of cash to do this research was going out every year. And it really spawned, a lot of intellectual property, a lot of, potential cures, things like that. So it was groundbreaking. Well, again, with the pandemic, the same thing happened. The state decided that, we're off by over $15 billion. And so where can we find some makeup money? So of course they had to go after the teeny tiny 8.5 million, even after they had made grants, because the governor had appointed me to the board that actually evaluated the grant applications. And so I swung into action again, and we resuscitated our coalition. And I, with others, launched a mega letter writing campaign and had meetings with top state legislators who had a voice in determining the outcome. And we got the money restored. So it makes me sort of very happy that not once but twice I was able to lead this, group that got together and worked with the right folks and got all the money restored. It's very, satisfying because I was able to use my legal skills for something that was probably much more significant than any M&A deal that I did, because many people who have the injury I have, they tend to be teenage boys who, jump, either have a ski accident like I had, or they, have a diving accident or hit a sandbar or whatever it is, or a speeding accident. And, they're young. They haven't lived the 51 years that I had lived when I had my accident, and they didn't have their careers. And it just really, in the early part of being adults, or not even an adult, have this terrible thing happen to them. They're never going to get the wherewithal to do what I would be able to do. So I had the wherewithal, so I decided to use it and never quit. That's another thing, I just never quit until I get what I want. I just get very, singular in my desire to solve a problem. And usually, with the training I got at Skadden Arbs, I did learn how to, walk through a brick wall if I had to. And I did it twice on spinal cord injury. And it made me very happy.
Were you able to meet anybody that's been benefited by that?
Well, yeah, me, because one of the things I think I told you a bit earlier before this call, my arms could barely move 2 inches away from my chest. And now I can, and I did it with, believe it or not, robotics that they use in retraining pathways in your brain. They don't really know exactly how it works, but they believe that if you do certain things repetitively through the use of computer simulations, you might be able to develop pathways around the problem you have, in my case, quadriplegia. And I got back a lot of use of my arms, which is tremendous. And the other thing is, as a result of that program, I came across a researcher in New York who was helpful to my pain, because some of the biggest problems you have are the things that are not obvious. And many people with spinal cord injury have this kind of phantom pain called neuropathic pain. And this particular doctor discovered that giving you electromagnetic stimulation on a certain part of your brain, 10 minutes once a week, the pain goes away, or 90% gone. And when I don't have those treatments, my hands feel like there are 10,000 needles sticking in every part of my arm from the elbow to the tip of my fingers. And then after the 10,000 needles, it feels also like your hands were stuck into a freezer. So you have that needling pain plus the feeling that you're freezing cold. You could be in a room that's 90 degrees and still want, a heavy down comforter and a flannel top sheet to keep you warm. And it's just a horrible byproduct. And so, yeah, it's helped me. So that sort of makes you a true believer, right?
It definitely does. Nancy, you've done so much in your life. What does the future hold for you? What does the future hold for indomitable Nancy Lieberman?
Who knows? The thing is, I never know. Always opportunities come my way that I least expect. And it puts me in touch with interesting people. And I'm always open for a new thing. And so it's a different chapter in my life. I never thought I'd be teaching at Columbia Law School as an adjunct lecturer, but I am doing that. And the students seem to like it. I've been asked back. So it's nice to do that and to train the next generation. And I don't exactly know, but there's always something around the corner. And I'm happy to try anything.
Nancy, last question. What's the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you?
What's the kindest thing? That is a great question. Could it be two people at the same time?
Absolutely.
My mom and dad. Without them, I'd be no place. And they were like a yin and yang. My father was tough, valued intellect. When he figured out that I had half a brain, he encouraged me to, go for it and do the best I could. And my mother was always the leavening factor. She would say, okay, you don't need to get straight A's and everything. Have a little fun when you go off to college. So they were sort of opposite in that respect. And it was a great balance. And I got unconditional support and love from both my parents. And that is the most important reason why I became who I became. So that's how I feel.
Nancy, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you haven't already, please take a moment and subscribe. Also, we would love your feedback. You can leave feedback in 3 easy ways. You can go to the blog post on our website. You can click Give Feedback link in the show notes on your device. And then thirdly, you can text the phrase LFL podcast to the number 44222. That's LFL PODCAST. And thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.